And there's the raiding party. Had a feeling you were coming. Suddenly I feel like a whole bunch of roaches should be running away. Oh, for Luca. Uh-huh. So for anybody who's tuning in who did not come from the Lara VAB stream, she has just brought her writers across from her writing stream, and Luca is one of her characters who deserved better. You can get that on a sticker or a t-shirt, or I don't know what kind of merchandise she has, but it's pretty accurate. So I'm going to assume that the audio is working because no one's told me yet that it hasn't. And then we'll go ahead and start talking. Oh, good, it works, yay. So hi, I'm Alena. If you haven't been here before, I'm Alena. I'm Lara's sister. She and I are both in And Sewing is Half the Battle, but I handle most of the Sewing is Half the Battle social media and stuff and tutorials and videos and that sort of thing. And I've had a lot of problems getting this stream off the ground, mostly technical, some of them because the cable company screwed things up, some of them because my house couldn't handle the cabling, some of them just equipment failure, because it's been that kind of year. For that matter, that's been most of this year. The past year has been interesting in a lot of ways. But I think we've got it straightened out now. As I said in my last stream, I did recable my house. The internet is mostly working. Of course, then my router was on the fritz last week, and that's why I didn't have a stream last Tuesday. But I'm not going to talk about how bad this year has been because I'm sure everyone, especially this week after current events, is just as exhausted of it as I am. So we're going to talk about other things. Although, for anybody who tuned in previously and heard the adventures of my house, that continues in kind. So the furnace got repaired. That's good. Or replaced, actually. I got a new furnace, new air conditioner. And then now I'm waiting on my new window to come because somebody smashed her little pit bull skull against the window in my bay window and broke the glass. So now I have a broken window. And yeah, this just... Oh, and then last night my TV died, too. Yeah, my power supply on my TV just gave up. And so there went my hopes of sitting down and playing Breath of the Wild for hours. Although I did eventually get a backup TV, so now I'm able to be trapped at home in a pandemic with suitable entertainment, so it's fine. This is a cosplay stream, so we're going to talk about costuming and breaking stuff down. Oh, yes, Shy Red Fox, the puppy is fine. I don't even think she realized it happened. It didn't shatter the glass, it just cracked it all the way through. And she's a pit bull, so she has zero body sensitivity. She was not even aware a thing happened. And she's currently back out front barking at cars going by again, which is how this whole thing started. I think it was probably a delivery truck that she went after and broke the window. I did not see it happen, but I came in and the glass was broken, and she has a habit of jumping up in the bay window whenever anybody parks in the driveway because she's like that. But, oh dear, Natalie's Aussie punched a window out of the wall a few years ago in the chat. That's, ow, that's a little more severe than this. This is just a crack through the glass. It's being replaced, it's being cared for, and the dog is fine. So hopefully everything goes well. So today, I originally had plans to do some live demos, and I just realized I forgot to mute my phone, so let me do that right away. And I was going to do an applique demo today and talk about how I've used applique in a bunch of different costumes. And some things happened. One of which is my spine is not cooperating. I have a damaged spine, and periodically it flares up and says, oh, you can't actually bend over or look down at anything. And that's one of those days. So I'm not sewing today because sewing involves a lot of looking down at the machine. So that's not happening. But I do want to talk about costuming planning, rather, and breakdowns. And, you know, last year was hard on a lot of creative people. And Lara, actually, if you go to Lara_VAB, her Twitch handle. She's in the chat now. She can wave. She's got a lot of great videos talking about how to cope with that creative dysfunction because of pressure from society and other things. So you can go check out her previous video streams. She's got a bunch of them. I'm not going to waste time on that now. But that means that I didn't get any cosplay work done in 2020 pretty much because all the events got canceled. My motivation went out the window. Other things took priority. And, you know, a lot of people in the cosplay community and creative work in general just kind of didn't get as much done as they were hoping. And that's normal, and it happened. But I don't want it to be a second year of that in a row. it is difficult to be motivated when we don't have any events scheduled. I mean, my two biggest events of the year are still on the wait and see side of things, so they're not even booking hotels yet. But I do want to start moving forward and getting work done. And so it's small steps. But what I was doing this week to try to approach this logically was I started doing my costume breakdowns so I could figure out, what do I need to make, what patterns, what materials, how much is this going to cost me, and start planning out the costumes that I should have started last year. And so I thought instead of doing the applique demos that my body is not going to let me do, I would talk a little bit about how to approach a costume project and how to break things down so that you have a system and so that you can make decisions more easily about how much you're putting into this, how much time, how to size things, how to do this. And so I'll just kind of talk you through that process. So one thing, the first thing we have to look at is when you pick a character that you want to make a costume of, you've got one of two reasons typically that people choose characters. Either you absolutely fall in love with that character and you must bring them to life, which has happened to me with a number of characters. Maybe they don't have interesting costumes, but I love this character, they're my fave, and I'm going to cosplay them. Or on the other side, and typically is more with people who have been doing costuming longer, they see a costume design, they don't care who's wearing the costume, but they want to make that costume. Maybe because it's a good creative challenge, maybe because it's just a really interesting visual, whatever the reason, you're either in it for the character or you're in it for the costume. Those are the two primary reasons. Both of these, but especially the one where your focus is on the costume, actually can work against you when you start doing your costume breakdown and trying to plan out how you're going to make it. Because if you're in it for the appearance of it, and I really want to make that thing, that suit of armor, that dress, whatever it is, that prop, the part that attracts you to that costume is the part that you're the most excited about. So naturally, when you start wanting to work on the costume, that's where you want to focus your efforts. But logically speaking, that's not usually where you want to start, because typically the part you're seeing is the outermost layer of the costume, or it's the accessory for the costume. And what you actually should be working on from a logical approach and from a structural approach is the part nobody's going to see, which is what's underneath that. So basically we're looking at how am I going to start this costume from the inside out. If you're talking about things like props or accessories, that could be structural. I've got a giant hammer or I've got a sword. How am I going to make that structurally sound? What am I going to put inside to reinforce it? I don't care about the surface detail yet. I care about carrying this thing and not having it break. If you're talking about clothing, you're looking at what are the structural undergarments that have to go under this. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get good breakdowns from the source. A lot of animation or video games, they'll actually have artwork showing the different layers of the costume, and so you get an idea of what actually goes under it. Sometimes you just have a picture of the outside. If you're looking at a film costume, for example, or an illustration, you may just have one angle of that costume, and you can see the outermost layers, but you can't see what's underneath that. So thinking about structure from the inside out, the first question is this character built like you? And in my case, I do a whole lot of crossplay. So I do a lot of male characters. I do a lot of things that are not designed for women to wear. And structurally, I am built much more like a girl than I am like anything else, because I am in fact female. So if I'm looking at a character, and that is a character who does not have curves, for example, the first thing I'm looking at is, am I wearing a binder? Am I going to have to pad my waist for this? How am I going to change the silhouette around my hips so that I look more like that finished character and have the right silhouette? For me, I've been cosplaying long enough that I have a lot of things already made that I can use for that. A commercial binder is the really easy one because I just put it on and it's done. And I've been using the same binder for 15 years or something, so a good investment if you're going to be doing crossplay. And if you are not interested in changing your body shape, maybe you aren't comfortable tucking or padding or binding or whatever you need to do to not look like yourself. Maybe you just aren't interested in doing that and you just want to wear the costume because it's fun. That's totally fine. The cosplay police are not going to come out and say, oh, I don't know, I see a curve and this is non-curvy character, or vice versa. If you want to do a different version of the costume, you want to do a gender bent version of the costume, that's fine. Do whatever you want to do. For me personally, I tend to try to make as accurate a visual as I can, and that includes the silhouette. So I don't have a problem with changing my body shape to look more like a character, or padding out my waist so that I look more like a tube, if that fits the costume better, whatever. It's up to you. Do whatever you're comfortable with. Do whatever your resources allow you to do. But do make a decision on that. Don't end up going one way or the other because, oh, I made the clothes and they don't exactly fit me, so I guess I'm going to be taping myself down really fast to try to make that work. So look at your body structure, look at how the costume's going to fit on you. If it's a really fitted, snug costume, you might be wearing different undergarments than if it's a very loose, flowing costume. It could be that you're wearing a compression shirt. It could be that you're wearing a tech shirt so it's slippery, like the long sleeve shirt I'm wearing right now. This is a very slick tech material that's makes it easier for me to wear tightly fitted clothes and have actually some ease where they can slide around my arm so it doesn't just bunch up. If it's something super snug, a layer of fabric underneath can actually make it easier to wear if it's a tight-fitting fabric than just having it against your skin. So sometimes if it's a very tailored costume, you may want to change what type of material you make the bottom layers out of. And I say make. This also applies to just choosing what you're wearing under the costume. I mean, if it's a costume you're going to wear a t-shirt under, great, wear a t-shirt under it. But decide what t-shirt you're wearing. Is it a fitted t-shirt? Is it a loose t-shirt? Is it long-sleeved or short-sleeved? All these questions still apply. So think about your undergarments as well. You know, if you are wearing boxers or briefs, if you're wearing a binder or a bra or a push-up bra or whatever, you know, if you're wearing a unitard to make everything slim down, know that going in. And then you just want to build from the inside out, one layer at a time. Some costumes are only one layer, some costumes are 15 layers. If you're playing a clamp character, they might be dragging on the floor 15 feet behind you and be 17 layers. It just depends on your source. And you can decide based on that particular costume what to focus your most efforts on in terms of you know, building up certain parts of your body or padding. If you are wearing something that's going to be very heavy or cosplay armor, for example, you're making very dense armor, you might want to build some padding into your base layers. We had a couple of costumes that we actually had rolled up fleece pads under the costume layers because we if anybody has seen our really old photos of the 15-foot articulated wings that we wore, we had a leather weight belt around our waist with a body harness attached with steel hooks on the back with these very heavy, I think Mephisto's wings, I think, were 17 pounds slotted into that. That's a lot of weight right across your collarbones as the body harness came over. So we had fleece padding underneath everything to take some of the strain off. So because the first time we tried them on, the straps were actually cutting in. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized the chat's going on too. Yeah, Clamp is definitely like that. In terms of costume design, Clamp loves layers and Clamp loves ridiculous costumes that cannot exist in real life. Clamp is also the perfect example of, I see that costume, I need to make it because it's a good challenge. Oh, and yeah, Lara's pointing out that Cupcake, who is her articulated velociraptor puppet, which lives in her basement and comes out for parades and fundraisers. Cupcake has a very heavy body harness. I think she weighs about, 80 pounds, I think? And all of that has to fit on the body as well. So lots of fleece padding on that to avoid bruising yourself. Because you don't want your costumes to become a permanent part of your body by doing damage to you. That's not fun. So if you are doing layers that are going to be putting pressure on you or are just fitting really tightly, you want to think about what material to do that with too. Last night I was shopping for boots for my Virgil costume that I'm working on slowly. Virgil. And I found a fairly reasonably priced pair of boots and they were available in my size, and of course they've got a measurement chart. Virgil's boots are contour cut leather equestrian boots, dress boots, so like dressage boots or hunt seat boots. And if you've never worn those, I have an equestrian background. I used to ride on my school's equestrian team and I grew up showing horses. They are extremely fitted. A fraction of an inch or a millimeter's thickness difference in what you wear under them can make the difference between wearing boots comfortably and you have just cut off all circulation to your feet and you're going to have serious problems for the next 2 weeks. And, you know, if you put them on and they aren't sized properly and your feet swell because of it, people have had to have their boots cut off because they can't take them off. You know, they are not easy boots to wear and they to be sized very carefully. But I found a pair of boots that was within my price range. It was actually way cheaper than all the others, and it was the right color, and they were the right shape and everything. And I looked at that and I said, I can buy these right now. Except I couldn't because I realized I hadn't figured out what I was making the pants out of, and because the thickness of the pants is going to affect what the final measurement of my calves are, I didn't want to take a chance, buy these really expensive non-returnable boots, and then find out, oops, they don't actually fit. So yeah, and Laura's pointing out that high-end competitors in equestrian sports have their boots custom made because it's the only way to guarantee that they're going to fit you. And you know, there's a huge breaking in process. You get your boots, you force them on your legs and feet, and for the next 2 weeks you wear boots around with hot towels tied over them to try to soften the leather enough to change the shape to your legs. So there's going to be a long process to get my Virgil boots done, but that's what he's wearing, and it's what they actually scanned into the game, so they are authentic, and that's what I need to find. Yay. Anyway, Virgil boots aside, but even things like, oh, well, I can go ahead and make the shoes because that's not fabric, it may be affected. If it's not, if you're just, oh, you know, this character wears a standard pair of boots or a standard pair of shoes or whatever, it may not be a problem. But things like, does the character wear high heels? High heels change the measurements of your calf because when the calf muscle contracts to adjust for the heel height, your calves will actually be bigger around if you're wearing high heels than if you're wearing flats. So that might be something, if you're making a very tailored costume, that you want to consider. And it may not matter. It certainly doesn't matter for the bulk of costumes, but if you happen to have the one costume where it does matter, you don't want to do a lot of work and then find out afterward it's not viable. So another thing to think about is as you're building up from the bottom out, different embellishments or accessories on the costume itself might change how the outer layers fit, which is another reason to build from the bottom out. One of my 7 5D fluorite costumes from Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, I have a thing for Phi. I make a lot of his costumes. Also Clamp, so they're very pretty. His base costume has these straps that run around the side and then have large buckles. They're three-lobed, like they sort of look floral, buckles down the front. Because of the way the buckles fit and because of the way the coat fits over that, I realized I can't actually have the buckles on my body for the coat to fit properly because the coat is drawn fitting in a certain way and it will not fit over buckles. Period. There was no way to do it because it's a very tailored clamp costume. So what I ended up having to do was when I built the inner costume, I actually Velcro all the buckles on top of the straps so that when it's time to put the outer coat on, because it's a 3-layer costume, I can just rip all the buckles off, put the coat on, button the coat, and now the coat fits and I have the proper layers showing underneath, but I don't have these weird bulges running down the side of my body where the buckles would fit. And so that's, you know, if you're doing something from a comic book or a manga or an illustration, those clothes don't have to fit that way in real life, but when you wear them, they do have to fit. So that's something else to consider. You know, do you need to make modifications to how the costume is actually built? The exception to this is if you're doing any sort of found item costume, you're finding things at a thrift store or you're recycling pieces you already have, you may end up with a scenario where you need to change the inner layers in order to accommodate the outer layer. You know, if you find the perfect coat for your character at Goodwill and you bring it home and you try it on and it's just a little snug, but you can still wear it, and then you realize, oh, actually this character's wearing a full suit underneath this overcoat. Now I need to figure out how I'm going to do that. And you might have to make a call. You might, if you can't alter the outer garment, you might be looking at, can I eliminate certain layers underneath? Can I make the layers underneath adjustable? Can I remove bulk from the layers underneath in any way? You know, can I strip out all the seam allowance and make them size down? You know, it's going to vary costume by costume. And again, not every costume is going to require this, but it's something you want to think about before you start working rather than after, because there's going to be a lot of time and effort that you could save there. Now, if your costume has a lot of different components to it, say you have, you know, multiple layers of garments and a large prop and a wig and a hat and boots and, you know, you've got all these different things to work on. Of course, you're going to be excited to work on that costume, and there's going to be something about that costume you really want to work on. And as long as those other components don't affect the fit of the clothing, you know, for example, if my character's wearing 3 layers of clothes but carrying a sword, the sword doesn't really affect the clothing. So if you are really gung-ho about that costume and know that for you personally, you are going to be more motivated to finish it if you have a piece done already, and the sword is way more interesting than the rest of the fabric costume, it's okay to go ahead and work on the sword. That's fine. you can, break those things down as far as, okay, the wig, I have to do the wig before the hat so I know how the hat fits. And or if it's a hat that you already have, I need to style the wig so that it fits under the hat. Or I need to get the sword done because then once the sword's done, I will have the motivation to work on the pants and boots that I don't want to work on. Whatever works for you is fine. Just have a system. That's really the most important thing, is to have a logical approach to it so you can break it down and say, these are the pieces I need to get done. This is the order in which I need to do those pieces. And when I started, many moons ago, many decades ago, when I started cosplaying, I didn't have a system at all because I didn't really know what I was doing and I didn't know how to sew. So I would just take pieces as I found them, or I would make the interesting pieces first and then try to squeeze other things underneath it, whatever. But over the years, I've figured out that for me, for my system, I need a list that I can check off, or I will not make sure to make everything before the date of the con. And sometimes I'm still pulling all-nighters right up to the con because cosplayers do that, even though it's bad for us. Um, but you can adjust as necessary for your own particular um, you know, proclivities, as far as whether you want to make the flashy prop first, or you want to have all the clothes done before you start on the prop. And if you have one thing that you're really looking forward to make and you put it at the end as a reward for getting the other stuff done, I've done that too. I can work on that thing that I really want to do once I do this really boring sewing work. That's fine too, whatever works for you. Um, so once you have your task list, your piece list, then you can start breaking down the individual costume pieces themselves, as far as, hey, this is a coat. It is more fitted than this style of coat, so I'm going to start looking at patterns that I can modify. Or this is a garment that has never existed in real life, and I need to wholesale invent how it's going to go together and start drafting patterns for that, or cobbling sewing patterns together from, my stash of commercial sewing patterns, or going to thrift stores and finding a bunch of different things that look similar and seeing if I can put them together. Whatever your approach is fine. Just have your list that you can organize. And I'm told, and maybe if there's anybody in the chat who knows about these, there are apparently a bunch of cosplay apps that you can get for your smart devices that will help you with your tasks list. I have never used any of them, so I can't recommend personally, but if anybody in the chat has any advice on those, I think Cosplanner was one that allowed you to plan for future costumes, and it might have had a shopping list integrated, and there may be some other ones as well, but I am not really up on them. I have heard of such things, but since I already had a system that was working for me, I never actually used the apps. Yeah, Laura, cosplay apps. She's in the chat going, what? But yeah, if you are the type of person who runs your life off of your cell phone, which I do, then maybe having an app would make it easier. I tend to have, all of my reference photos in an accessible, I can pull up whether it's Evernote or Dropbox or a remote file on my desktop or OneDrive or whatever you happen to be using. I make a directory with all of my reference photos and any particular notes about types of fabric, so that when I am out, not in a year ending in 20 or 21, because I haven't been out anywhere, but when I normally am out running around town, or I stop at a thrift store, or I go to a fabric store, or I go to a garage sale, if I see something and I think, that looks like it might be useful, I'll pull up all of my in-progress costume reference photos and skim through them and say, oh yes, that taffeta tablecloth looks exactly like the cape on this one character, and see what I can do with that, because I do recycle a lot. Laura is plugging Evernote in the chat, and yeah, there are a variety of apps, and it's all personal preference what you use, but have some sort of system that syncs your devices, or that you can access with an app from your phone, so that if your desktop computer's at home and you have all your pictures there and you have all your notes there, and then you happen to wander into a really great deal where a fabric store you didn't know existed is having a clearance sale all of a sudden, that happened to us once, then you can pull up everything you need and figure out what you can buy at a really great discount and save yourself some money. Also, it's really good to have a backup someplace that's not at home, because who knows what happens. Maybe your internet goes down and you have to look at cloud stuff always from your mobile phone as opposed to from your hardwired computer. So having things syncing and backing up to other locations is also beneficial. So that took a lot less time than I was actually thinking it would, probably because I talk really fast. I'm skimming over my very brief outline that I put together when I realized I was not going to be able to do the applique about an hour ago. Um, so maybe the applique for next week. We'll hope for next week. And I don't know how many people have questions or comments or other topics in the chat that might be interested. But if you have a question or comment or other topic that you want to bring up in the chat, I am totally fine with just making this an open discussion Q&A session. That's fine too. On that note, because I'm really hoping that my internet stays stable enough to actually make this be a consistent, regular thing. If you have any topics that you are interested or any demos that you would like to see, please feel free to reach out on any of the social medias that are on this side. I think it's this side of the screen. And contact me and say, hey, I would love to see a demo of fill in the blank. And then I can do a video on that, or failing a live video, if it's not something I can do a live video on very easily, I do have a YouTube channel with tutorials, and I can do that too. Okay, Shy Red Fox has a question. What is the most complicated costume you made? Probably pain, I would think. One of the pains. So several years ago, it's been a while now, 2010 maybe, um, a friend of ours wanted to do a set of Final Fantasy X-2 costumes, and we were all going to do different costume variations of Pain, the character. And I did Gunner Pain, which is the one with the little half skirt down the side and pistols. And Michelle did Dark Knight Pain, which is the one with the spiky armor. And Laura, because Laura is that much extra, it did Full Throttle Pain, which is a 14-foot wide mecha with spinning motorized blades that hovers off the ground. So we built the thing. It was a nightmare. It had puppetry so that Laura could curve her fingers and the blades outside would spin and move, and it was very technically complex. And we had spinning blades on a little high torque motor that was attached inside. But the costume had a lot of structural issues. It was dangerous because people at cons would run into it and knock Laura off her stilts, and she almost broke her ankle getting on stage once, and it was a mess. Laura's sharing links. In the chat. But yeah, that was probably the most technically complicated costume that we've done, but it was also probably the least fun costume that we've done. And we actually destroyed it. We have video somewhere. I think it's on our Facebook page because it was a really long time ago. But we have video at the last outing for that costume was Gen Con, and we went backstage after the masquerade. Laura took the costume off. We invited all the other cosplayers over with their props, their staves and their swords and their shoes and everything. High-heeled shoes. It was great. And we said, okay, we're going to destroy this costume. Who wants to help? And everybody came in and just beat the thing to death. And because we weren't going to carry it out. It was going to end up in a dumpster because it was not movable at that point. So we did have fun destroying it. And unfortunately, the costume never made it entirely on stage in one piece. Because of the structures of the convention stages and the size of the ramps and the stairs and everything, sacrifices always had to be made. And at one point, Laura went down and had to be cut out of part of the costume because she was pinned by it. So every time it was on stage, it was most but not all of the costume. And as far as fabric complexity, probably the most technically complicated costumes we've done were Saiyankoku Monogatari, I think, because that involved a whole lot of silk dyeing and a bunch of different techniques. And I mean, we've done so many cosplays. We've been cosplaying for almost 20 years. As scary as that is, it was 2002 was when we started, so 19 years. But I think that one's probably the most technical. I don't know. There's a lot of costumes. So yeah. Any other questions, comments, topics of discussion? I know there's a delay, so I'm just watching the chat. And obviously, I don't have a time limit on this, so we can do longer or shorter streams as necessitated by topics. But if you get me going on something, I can talk for hours, and I will. So, topics that are focused typically keep me under control a little bit. As Laura and I always joke in our panels, we will talk until the room runs out of oxygen. And that's not too far off. Okay, well, I'm not seeing a lot of other questions, so Oh, we have. Oh, no, we do. We do. I'm sorry. I missed one in the middle of all of your links. Okay, so question is, what topics can we look forward to in the future? Well, hopefully next week. Applique. I've got a costume is going to be doing some applique with satin stitching, and I've talked to a lot of people at conventions at our sewing panels who are not really comfortable with how to do that because there are not a lot of really clear tutorials on it that I've seen. So I'm going to be doing a demo. It's actually the same technique I used for my Princess Zelda costume, doing the tabard, the pallium down the front of her dress with all of the, the Triforce and the Hyrule Crest and all that stuff, and the gradient dye. And I'm going to be doing that on a collar next week, hopefully. So we'll be cutting out shapes, we'll be adhering them, and then we'll be stitching over them. I'm going to try to do all that live if I can figure out a camera setup that shows all the different stations. I do have two webcams, so I can angle them possibly and do a split screen thing. And we'll see how that works. So hopefully applique. But I'm also, I've had a lot of people ask a lot of things. Just today somebody requested that I talk about individual costumes and kind of tell the stories behind them and what we did with them. I'm fine doing that. I want to do some sewing tutorial stuff. I'm going to be definitely doing some armor live streams because I have some projects coming up for hopefully the end of this year that have some armor. So I'm going to be doing live builds of the armor and probably also some live resin casting because I've got a lot of that to do. And I have two different costumes that have swords that I need to build. So depending on how I can set up my workshop with the video, hopefully some live sword building too. Not live as in live steel because we can't carry steel, but live as in streaming video. And oh, sorry, Bridger, I missed the chat is very small on the side of my screen. I missed a question. Bridger was asking about the usual time for live streams. As of right now, yes. My plan is to be Tuesday nights after Laura's stream because that way I can actually watch Laura's stream. So for the time being, as long as we are still living in pandemic land, so probably another 6 months at least, Tuesdays is going to be the day that I am doing the stream. If that changes, obviously I will make an announcement and change the schedule. But the goal right now is to do a weekly Tuesday stream. It's not going to last really late because I know, at least in this part of the world, people do eventually have to go to bed, and people who have things like jobs where they have to get up in the morning don't want to be up until 11 watching cosplay streams. So it's probably going to be in the range of like between 30 minutes and an hour, depending on the topic. So you should be out of here by 9 p.m. Eastern, hopefully. People like Grace who are on the other side of the world, I'm sorry, I can't control your clock, but I will try to keep it on the shorter side so it doesn't run too late in the night, since I know we have a lot of Midwestern people in our cosplay circuit who are going to be watching the stream. So I think that just about wraps up everything, unless there are other questions. So if people have any other questions or discussion topics they want to bring up, or suggestions for future videos, we can also throw those out. And I may also branch out too and talk about other stuff that's not specifically cosplay, crafting and making stuff in general. I do also run a laser cutting business, so if we want to take a field trip and watch some laser cutting, we can do that too. The field trip being going exactly one floor down to my basement, which is where my laser cutter lives. So I can talk about that as well. Oh, Grace says it's 2:30 p.m. Okay, well, Grace can have her mid-afternoon snack while watching the stream. Grace is in New Zealand, where they are having much nicer, warmer weather than we are because it's the middle of winter here and it's the middle of summer in the southern hemisphere. So it'll be summer here eventually, someday. We'll see the sun again, we hope. We had a little bit of sun today. None yesterday, though. Okay. Oh, Bridger said she would be interested in the laser cuttings. That's an option then. And, oh, Blue Egg Adventures. Suggestion, dyeing cloth. Yes, dyeing, especially some of the dyeing techniques that I used for Zelda and Ashura and Sankoku. I did a lot of batik dyeing and resist dyeing and dip dyeing and hand painting dye and that sort of thing. So fabric dyeing could be a good multi-video topic because we could talk about a lot of different projects and different types of techniques. Also the different types of dyes. There are a lot of new fabric dyes on the market within I mean, new within the last 5 to 10 years, compared to when we started cosplaying, when you could dye cotton with RIT in some colors and there was nothing else. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about with fabric dye. Um, and Laura's suggesting basic and crazy advanced dyeing. Yes, the crazy advanced dyeing will definitely require some protective equipment, because the last time I did that, I ended up exploding a packet of dye in my kitchen, and the stains are still on my cabinets. So not recommended to explode packets of dye in your kitchen. But yeah, we can add some of those to the list. The when we do what topics will be determined by a lot of factors, including the weather, because some of the materials that I work with can only be worked with not in the house for chemical safety reasons or for, sanding dust reasons. And since my workshop is in my detached garage, it is currently like 22 degrees out there. So nobody wants to be working out in 22 degrees, especially with heat sensitive chemicals. So we may move topics around based on what the weather's doing, what our availability is with certain things, but I will try to mix it up so we don't have too much of the same thing in the row. Um, so we can see what else people suggest too. And I'm going to be posting on our social media as well, looking for additional topic suggestions. So if you have any later questions or topic suggestions, or I think it would be interesting to hear about X. I know Grace mentioned my film work previously, asking about, what stories do you have from film sets? And I can do that. I may have to get something slightly stronger than root beer to drink for that, though, because there are some good memories and there are some adventures that require fortification. Um, let's see. Natalie's asking, do you ever do leather tooling? I have done some leather stamping, but very little, and I've done very little tooling. I think I did one piece once that didn't come out very well. I have a leather tooling kit, and it's something I really want to learn, but there always seem to be one or two other things ahead of it on the craft projects that I'm interested in, just because I'm interested in them, as opposed to I have to get this costume done for this particular convention. That being said, I do have a couple of costumes coming up where leather tooling might be useful. So we might have to exchange some communication about leather tooling, because I would be very interested in learning what you do. Um, there there are several video game costumes that involve a lot of leather work. Legend of Zelda, obviously, Link, especially Twilight Princess Link, had a lot of leather. So I did see a fair amount of leather tooling and just leather work in general on costumes like that. The Uncharted games, which it was Uncharted 3, had the leather bandolier and some special tooling on the various equipment, the belt bag and all of that. And one of the forums I was on at the time, on the RPF, there was a professional leather worker who was coming in and showing every step of his process to make those exact pieces, that looked like they just came off the screen. And that was glorious. So yeah, I would love to see more people discussing leather work, and we can certainly talk about that. And maybe I can persuade Natalie to slide some information my way. Or I don't know, come on the show and talk. I'll just spring that on you. I haven't asked you yet, but I'm always looking for additional points of view too. It's not just the me show. Technically, it's the And Sewing is Half the Battle stream. We just happen to be stuck in a pandemic where we're all quarantined at home, and so it's just me because I'm the one with the channel. So maybe someday, after we can see each other in person again, I can get the other two members of And Sewing is Half the Battle, and we can do a group chat. That would be nice. But that day is not yet here. So 2020, 2021, they all blur together. It's all the same. Um, at least we're making progress. Things are slowly getting better. But I said I wasn't going to talk about depressing current events, so let's not talk about depressing current events. Um, so anyway, yeah, thank you for stopping by, all of you raiding party people who are still here, and certainly we will expand this as we go forward. This is only my third or fourth successful stream, maybe third, I think, that did not die prematurely due to internet streaming issues. But so far things seem stable, and my new cables seem to be working, and I seem to have beat the router into submission. So I'm looking at it like I'm threatening it. It's right behind me on my dresser. And so hopefully this is going well, and we have audio this time, unlike last time. So I feel like this may actually be possible to do this every week without having to reset every 5 minutes. So I think that is all of our questions, unless I missed any. And I'm looking through the chat, and I don't see any other ones. All right, so tentatively next week will be applique. If something happens and 2021 is, breaking things as often as 2020 was and something doesn't work, then we can talk about dying or some of the other stuff. We have lots of backup topics. And I will be updating, now that I know that the stuff is working here, I will be updating the page with the new stream schedule and all of that. And if you can keep an eye on our social media for topic announcements, I may, because I'm home all the time now and I work on stuff throughout the day, I may just hop on and do some live work streams periodically. So if I'm sewing or building something, you may just see me that, the video is going. If you want to get notified when those happen, you can subscribe to the channel. I'm not going to pressure you to subscribe, but I mean, it's a thing you can do. I'm just going to throw that out there. And subscribing, wait, there's following and subscribing. Sorry, I used the wrong word. You can follow the channel for free. You can subscribe to the channel if you are a really nice person who really wants to not have ads at the beginning of their video, or you can also subscribe for free with an Amazon Prime subscription. I think you get one free Twitch subscription per Amazon Prime account. But following, you will get notified by email or whatever you set up in your preferences if you actually want to know when I'm just popping on and doing live streams of building stuff. So thank you all for coming out. I'm going to wrap it up here because we've got a good 40-minute video, and I feel like I don't want to press my luck since the internet hasn't dropped out in the last 40 minutes, and I don't know how long it's going to last. So thank you all for coming, and I will see you all, well, some of you, whoever deigns to come back, I will see you next Tuesday. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.